Keanu Reeves had always been known as someone who could see in people what others failed to notice. But on that day, at an elegant restaurant with a cozy terrace, no one expected his presence to become the key to changing several destinies at once. No one foresaw the conflict that threatened to turn into humiliation and bitter tears. And above all, no one could have predicted that the intervention of a quiet stranger, who turned out to be Keanu, would turn everything upside down and leave a lasting impression of genuine kindness. Friends, before we immerse ourselves in this extraordinary story, allow me to ask you for 3 simple actions: subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Your support inspires me to continue sharing warm and emotional stories, ones that make us reflect on the power of humanity and compassion. Now, let's return to that very day when the modesty and generosity of Keanu Reeves revealed their beauty to the world. A sunny afternoon. A small but refined restaurant with a terrace stood on a quiet street, tucked between tall buildings and sparse greenery. Barely noticeable stone steps led to the entrance, where waiters in pristine white shirts politely greeted patrons. The tables on the open terrace were positioned to let guests talk comfortably while enjoying fresh air and a view of the city's narrow lanes. A gentle breeze carried the pleasant aroma of freshly baked bread and appetizing dishes, amplifying the feeling of coziness. Somewhere inside, a soft piano melody played, creating the impression that everyone was here for a moment of quiet joy and tranquility. Keanu Reeves, dressed in a simple black t-shirt and dark jeans, was also there, seated at a modest table on the edge of the terrace. His presence did not stand out. He disliked fanfare and red carpets in everyday life. Outwardly, he looked no different from the other guests, though he radiated a particular warmth and calmness. A waiter had already brought him a glass of water and smiled knowingly, recognizing the actor but not making a fuss. Keanu, as usual, sat in quiet contemplation, surveying the establishment. At a neighboring table sat a father named Nikolai with his teenage daughter, Alina, who was about 13. Judging by her timid expression, it was her first time in a place like this. Her smile kept appearing and disappearing, as though she were afraid of doing something wrong. It was clear that Nikolai was going through a difficult period. He had saved for a long time to give his daughter at least a small celebratory meal. One could tell he was trying to show Alina that life had moments of happiness, despite heavy workdays and a nearly empty wallet. Unfortunately, not everything promised to go smoothly that day. At a table nearby sat a woman whose arrogance seemed palpable. Her name was Victoria, and by her look, she was accustomed to luxury. A bright red dress, large jewelry, and a confident gaze. She kept glancing around with barely concealed disdain, zeroing in on the smallest imperfections of those around her. Clearly, she didn't like the family with the child at one table, the way a young man was dressed at another, and, in fact, everything seemed to irritate her. The waitstaff scurried back and forth, trying to please her, yet Victoria remained dissatisfied, going out of her way to display her imagined superiority. Seated not far away, Keanu discreetly observed the situation. A man of simplicity and peace, he disliked conflict but also could not remain indifferent to injustice or someone else's troubles. He noticed how Victoria's gaze kept landing on Nikolai and Alina, as if she were preparing to unleash a biting remark. Sure enough, Victoria eventually stood up and approached a waiter, raising her eyebrows at the sight of the father and daughter. The words rolling off her tongue were filled with contempt, wrapped in a veneer of politeness as she complained about the service. But then she shifted her focus directly onto Nikolai and Alina. In an instant, her hidden barbs found a target. From her first words, it became clear that she wouldn't rest until she demonstrated her supposed superiority. Keanu waited a few moments, remaining in place but mentally ready to intervene if necessary. That moment came quickly. Victoria raised her voice and hurled another barrage of insults at Nikolai, making it sound as though some people belonged in cheap cafeterias, not in respectable restaurants. Caught off guard, Nikolai couldn't respond, and Alina shrank in her seat, hoping to disappear. A hush fell over the terrace, and the waitstaff exchanged nervous glances. Keanu, although maintaining an outwardly calm demeanor, realized that this had gone far enough. When Victoria's next round of harsh words fell on Nikolai, Keanu decisively approached. He looked toward the waiter, as though seeking some hint of support from the staff, but the young man only shrugged helplessly. It was time to step in. "Good afternoon," Keanu said, addressing Victoria in a calm and even voice. "I'm sorry, but it seems you're being too harsh toward these people. I'm sure you didn't mean." He tried to soften the situation, giving Victoria a chance to back down gracefully, but she wasn't having it. She raised her chin defiantly, looking at him with contempt. "What business is it of yours? Who do you think you are, anyway?" The terrace went silent. Nikolai lowered his gaze in shame, uncertain why he should feel embarrassed, and Alina felt overwhelmed under so many stares. Some patrons already recognized Keanu but couldn't believe the famous actor was involved in an altercation with a demanding patron. "I'm just someone who cares when people are humiliated," Keanu responded gently. He spoke in a measured, respectful tone, hoping Victoria might feel remorse. Instead, she narrowed her eyes and sneered, apparently still clueless that a global film star stood before her. It never crossed her mind that Keanu was anything but just another customer. "Maybe you do care," she retorted. "But you'd be better off minding your own business. People are trying to dine here, and some obviously don't belong in a place like this." Nikolai tried to politely say that he and his daughter had the right to eat where they pleased, since they would pay for their meal, but he struggled to form the words. Victoria cut him off with more biting remarks. Keanu mentally took a deep breath. He wouldn't let this descend into further unfairness. "You know," he said, "I think everyone deserves respectful treatment, no matter what they look like or how much money they have. Don't you agree?" She responded with a bitter laugh. By now, her annoyance had shifted onto him as well. She impatiently tapped her high-heeled shoe on the floor, making her hostility clear. Nikolai glanced at his daughter. Alina wanted to vanish, so uncomfortable was the attention. She recalled a moment from her past, a flashback to a time she was mocked at school for her modest clothes. Then, no one stood up for her, and the emptiness she felt had stayed with her ever since. Now, though she was frightened, she felt relief that Keanu was defending them. She might not know the details of who he was, but she saw he was someone who wouldn't let her or her father remain victims of ridicule. There was a fragile sense of hope, however faint. "Dad," she whispered, leaning closer to him, "maybe we should just leave." Nikolai squeezed her hand, frustration and sadness in his eyes. He didn't want his daughter to feel that shame again. At the same time, he was grateful for this kind stranger who spoke up for them. Leaving now would mean giving up without a fight for their dignity, and all those hard-earned savings would go to waste. Victoria, meanwhile, had picked up the menu again, muttering under her breath about the cheap look of certain patrons. Keanu decided to give her a moment to cool off before speaking, so he moved toward Nikolai's table and asked quietly. "Are you two all right? Need any help?" Nikolai looked up at him, recognizing him, and his eyes widened in astonishment. It dawned on him why this man was so calm, so collected, and emanating an incredible kindness. Fighting back a wave of surprise, Nikolai exhaled. "Thank you. I just wanted to treat my daughter to something special. This was supposed to be a small celebration." "I understand. Let's try to continue calmly. Maybe she'll calm down, too," Keanu answered, nodding slightly in Victoria's direction. But Victoria wouldn't calm down. She summoned a waitress to complain about the cheap appearance of certain patrons and the restaurant's lack of a proper face control. The waitress, clearly uncomfortable, had no idea how to respond. With each of Victoria's words, the air grew more strained. Some patrons who found it too awkward got up to leave, but most stayed, curious to see how this would end. Keanu cleared his throat softly, drawing Victoria's attention. "Excuse me, but perhaps it would help if we were a bit more understanding. Everyone has challenges, and no one likes rude remarks. And who are you, some local moralist? She snapped with sarcasm. I have every right to say what I think. Yes, you have the right. But kindness often achieves far more than insults. His tone was even, with no hint of anger. But it only riled Victoria more. She tossed her hair back in irritation. And what next? You're so noble. Are you trying to get attention so you can, do what? Become famous? Some people in the restaurant chuckled at this remark, aware of the irony that she was speaking to a world-renowned actor. Keanu gave a patient nod, refusing to mock her openly. He truly didn't want a farce, but sensed that a turning point was near. Nikolai noticed that Alina was trembling. The conflict was escalating, and the emotional weight was crushing. Looking around, he saw most people were silent, uncertain how to respond. Yet from Keanu's posture came unwavering resolve. It became clear that he would soon have to reveal his identity, at least enough to bring clarity. Keanu signaled to the restaurant's administrator, a young but obviously flustered man, to come closer. The poor administrator was anxious about how Victoria might react but took a step forward anyway. Excuse me, Keanu began, perhaps we can find a compromise. This lady seems uncomfortable with the company, while this father and daughter simply want to enjoy their lunch. The administrator looked at Victoria nervously. She lifted her chin even higher, glaring at Keanu as though he were invisible. Well, the administrator swallowed hard, usually, we don't turn patrons away. That's exactly the problem. Victoria interrupted. You let in all sorts of, she cast a disdainful look at Nikolai. Alina's heart clenched painfully at the insult. She was once again ready to flee. But Keanu sensed that if everyone just left, neither Victoria nor anyone else would learn a lesson. Ma'am, he said softly, sometimes we don't know who's sitting beside us. And we judge people by their appearance, never thinking about what might lie beneath. For example, you believe these two don't belong here, even though they paid for their meal, sat down quietly. Yes, she cut him off, her voice dripping with sarcasm, they paid, so they have the right. But why should I tolerate this pathetic sight in an upscale establishment? Because morals and kindness can't be bought, Keanu replied. Then, someone among the bystanders finally spoke up. A middle-aged man rose from his table and nodded at Victoria. Lady, you've crossed the line. Let these people eat in peace. Victoria spun around, ready to unleash more sarcasm, but stopped short. She hadn't expected anyone else to stand up for Nikolai and Alina. With a look of contempt, she shook her head as though she believed they were all conspiring against her. The tension on the terrace reached a boiling point. One more word, and Victoria might explode in rage. Yet she had no idea her situation was about to shift drastically. She was about to discover the truth of who this man confronting her really was. And you're all against me now? She asked, glaring around and tossing her hair off her shoulder. What right do you have to judge me? She took a step closer to Keanu, as if to put him in his place. But at that moment, one of the waitstaff approached her, presumably in an attempt to restore calm, whispering something while glancing at Keanu. Victoria froze, frowning as though trying to comprehend. Slowly, she turned her gaze back to him. You. Are you, that Keanu Reeves? She managed, sounding unconvinced that such a famous actor could just be sitting there. Yes, he answered, inclining his head. But I'm here to enjoy an ordinary day in a nice restaurant and to support people who, in my view, are being treated unfairly. His words landed like a bombshell. Anyone who still doubted him now realized the truth, it was Keanu Reeves. Some guests pulled out their phones, attempting to record discreetly. The air was saturated with tense anticipation. All eyes turned to Victoria. She suddenly felt the ground slipping out from under her. She'd gone from insulting a random person to speaking rudely to an adored actor known for his humility and generosity. For a moment, it seemed Victoria would apologize. Pride, however, wouldn't let her. She stood there, trying not to show how deeply her shock cut her. "So what?" she blurted, striving for indifference. "You think just because you're famous, I'm supposed to faint?" Keanu offered a calm smile, a gentle, knowing look of someone used to unusual reactions. He replied quietly. "No, not at all. But you could show a bit more respect to other people. After all, it's not about fame or status." His mild voice resonated with those around him. Victoria, now the center of attention in a very different sense, realized she was in danger of looking like the clear villain in everyone's eyes. Though reluctant to accept it, she began to sense how foolish she appeared. Victoria made a show of stepping back a bit, glancing around at the administrator, then at Nikolai and Alina, and back to Keanu. Her mind raced, how to salvage her pride. The longer she stood, the more obvious her defeat in this moral standoff became. Nikolai looked at Keanu gratefully. Alina clutched her father's hand. She would never forget the day a stranger defended them. That wave of relief and acknowledgement washed over her face. "Maybe you should apologize," Keanu suggested gently, meeting Victoria's gaze. "Not to me, but to these people who had to endure your hurtful words." Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Her lips trembled, and her expression hardened. Apologizing meant admitting fault, letting her ego crumble. Yet everyone was watching. Unable to rewind time, she stood there, torn between shame and arrogance. Finally, her voice quavered. I don't believe that but she couldn't finish. "Of course, it's your decision," Keanu responded in the same calm tone. "I just want to make sure no further hostility arises." The administrator, sensing the tension, suggested Victoria head inside and continue her meal at a different table so as not to disturb others. She stood her ground as if retreating would signal weakness. A single pair of hands began clapping. Someone among the patrons decided to show their support for Keanu's actions. Several others joined in. Victoria's fists clenched. She realized she'd lost any sympathy she might have had, if she'd had any at all. "MMPH," she muttered, clearly shaken. She hesitated a second longer, then hurried off into the restaurant, presumably leaving by another exit. Her heels tapped loudly on the floor until she vanished from view. Likely she just wanted to escape those scrutinizing eyes before whom she had tried so hard to look superior. A gentle hush followed, and then quiet murmurs of relief. Nikolai glanced at Keanu with an awkward grin. "Thank you. We don't even know how to react." "Just enjoy the rest of your day," Keanu said kindly. "I think your daughter deserves some happy memories." Alina looked straight into Keanu's eyes. "Thank you for standing up for us. I'll never forget it." His warm, sincere smile was impossible to miss, and everyone could see a special light emanating from him, one that didn't dim under fame or wealth. After a few minutes, patrons resumed their meals and conversations. The storm had passed, yet the story was not over. Thanks to Keanu, a small miracle had only begun. Some visitors, inspired by what they had seen, wanted to help. An elderly couple invited Nikolai and Alina over for dessert, promising to cover the cost simply out of goodwill. Others, smiling, approached with words of support, and for the first time, Alina felt what it was like to receive more than silence or mockery. She experienced real kindness. Keanu returned to his table, not wishing to attract more attention, but he couldn't take his eyes off Nikolai and Alina. He watched as Alina's eyes lit up with the confidence that springs forth when you realize you're not alone and that the world can be compassionate. Nikolai, meanwhile, felt a heavy weight lift from his soul. He was proud not to have run away. He may have hesitated at first, but he found the courage to remain. Soon, the administrator invited Keanu, Nikolai, and Alina to a special table on the terrace's edge, where there was a lovely city view and warm sunshine. It seemed he wanted to smooth over the unpleasantness of Victoria's outburst by offering some complimentary treats. Keanu and Nikolai thanked him, and Alina, feeling like a princess, inhaled with delight. It was one of those moments when simple human gestures transformed into something truly magical. Seated at the new table, they began talking. It turned out Nikolai worked in a small workshop, earning just enough to get by but trying to save a little so he could occasionally give his daughter a treat. Alina shyly admitted that she loved to draw and dreamed of someday holding a small art exhibit of her own. Keanu listened with genuine interest, asking questions about how she viewed the world and what themes she liked to depict. Each time she answered, her eyes sparkled more brightly. Not wanting to take undue advantage of his fame, Keanu made a modest offer. "Maybe you could show me a couple of your drawings sometime. If you'd like, I could mention your talent to some friends. But the most important thing is your own confidence." Alina nearly burst into tears of joy, not because it was Keanu Reeves, but because her dreams had been validated by someone who had seen so much in his own life. After a heartfelt conversation, Keanu glanced around. He noticed how some of the other patrons continued to look at their table, but now with warm curiosity. It wasn't judgment or discomfort, it was inspiration. The kindness he had shown, and Nikolai's courage in staying put, had infected people with a desire to support others. Someone decided to leave extra tips for the waiter, someone else offered a friendly nod to strangers at a neighboring table, another suggested that Alina show her artwork at a small local art club. This was the very chain of goodness that can start with a single small act. Even though Victoria had stormed out in anger, her rude behavior ironically led to an unexpected positive outcome. People united in their desire to stand up for fairness and help those in need. Nikolai found himself in disbelief at his own happiness. He glanced carefully at Keanu. "You know, it's still hard to believe this is real. I thought this would be just another ordinary day, and now I'm sitting at the same table with you." Keanu smiled softly and shrugged. "Well, I'm still the same guy who came here to enjoy a quiet lunch and a glass of water. I'm just glad our chance meeting did some good." Alina gathered the courage to speak. You really think I can do something with my drawings? People say it's silly. If your heart tells you to pursue art, then that's the road you should follow," Keanu replied. "Not everyone becomes famous right away, but if it brings you joy, that's already wonderful." Her eyes brimmed with grateful tears. Nikolai nodded, overwhelmed by appreciation for Keanu's kindness. A waiter, still touched by what had happened, brought another dessert, a delicate chocolate cake. The administrator sheepishly admitted the restaurant wanted to offer them a treat to make up for the earlier unpleasantness. Nikolai and Alina thanked them, and Keanu offered a modest smile, understanding that sometimes even a tense conflict could draw out the best in people. When the cake arrived with small plates, it felt almost ceremonial. 3 very different people sat there, bound by this unexpected incident, and the sweetness of the dessert seemed all the more satisfying after the tension they had endured. The sun began its slow descent, bathing the terrace in a gentle glow, making the restaurant feel even cozier. Their conversation drifted away from the conflict, toward Alina's future, how everyone has dreams, and how no one should feel ashamed of being humble. The key is to remember that kindness isn't in loud words but in real deeds, Keanu concluded, looking at Alina and her father. People nearby, who overheard, felt an inner warmth. Just as Victoria's anger had subsided, these words seemed to lift a weight from everyone's shoulders. Some time passed, and Keanu rose from the table, sensing he should be on his way. Nikolai and Alina also prepared to leave, they had more plans for the evening. Before they went their separate ways, Keanu extended his hand to Nikolai. "I wish you both good luck. And please don't stop believing in yourselves, and in Alina." "Thank you," Nikolai said earnestly, shaking his hand. "You've done so much more than you know." "Sometimes a small act of kindness can set off a chain of changes," Keanu replied with a grin. "I hope you experience that." He turned to Alina. "And if you like, keep drawing. Your talent might inspire someone else, even if you don't realize it yet. I will, Alina managed, tears of joy threatening to spill. They parted ways. Nikolai and Alina, hand in hand, left with renewed faith in themselves, while Keanu, running a hand through his hair, walked casually down the street, hoping not to be noticed. Yet many who remained sent him grateful looks, fully aware they had just witnessed a story of simple human compassion. One question lingered: what about Victoria? Some patrons secretly hoped she might come to realize her mistake, feel remorse for her high-handed behavior. Even if she was angry now, maybe the memory of the day her arrogance backfired would eventually prompt some soul-searching. If not, so be it, at least Nikolai and Alina left enriched by the kindness shown to them, holding on to a deeper sense of belief that the world isn't always cruel. The restaurant returned to its routine, but the atmosphere had changed. The waiters smiled a bit more. Customers were friendlier. Many recognized that such moments of kindness recharge could follow them beyond the restaurant, onto the streets, into homes and workplaces, everywhere there was room for empathy. As they were leaving, Nikolai turned to Alina. "You know, I think we don't need to be afraid anymore. Even if someone tries to humiliate us again, there are people in this world who will stand up for us. And we can be that support for someone else." Alina smiled. "Maybe someday I'll paint a picture of how one kind person changed our day and gave us hope." They were simple words, but behind them lay a huge wave of warmth and faith. Indeed, even a small display of kindness can spark a chain of events involving dozens, hundreds, of hearts. You never know when a friendly hand or a single supportive word might rescue someone's dream or even their life. And so our touching story draws to a close, but its message remains with us: never underestimate the power of kindness. Often, tiny gestures, brief encounters or unexpected moments of warmth, can transform people's lives. Nikolai and Alina gained not just a pleasant day out but also a new confidence. Other patrons learned that sometimes you have to step in when you see injustice rather than stand silently by. And while Victoria might never openly admit her fault, she'll likely recall the day her arrogance was laid bare before the eyes of strangers. Thank you for watching, or perhaps listening, to this story all the way through. If it touched your heart, please give this video a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, because we have many more inspiring videos ahead. Remember, sometimes a single quiet word of support is enough to reignite someone's fading hope. Be kind, and kindness will surely find its way back to you.